At this time, I'm also thinking of all those whose lives have been affected by cancer. For everyone facing this disease, in whatever form, please do not lose faith or hope. You are not alone.
A young lad was quietly bidding his farewells when Kate Middleton appeared. She then performed an unimaginable act that stunned everyone. The lad initially questioned whether he was seeing it. Blinking a few times, he attempted to make sense of the familiar face in front of him. The Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, was right there, gently smiling at him. His parents, unsure what to say, looked at Kate and their son with equal shock. Kate went to his bedside and the room fell silent. She spoke gently to him, as if they had known each other for years. Still processing what was going on, the lad managed a small smile in response, expressing an odd mix of surprise and excitement. Kate dropped down next to him and said a few words that only he could hear. So what happened next? That turned out to be the real surprise. Kate was not there for a quick visit. Not even his family could have predicted what she did in the following few minutes. Jack lay silently in his hospital bed earlier that day, gazing at the soft glow of the afternoon sun through the window blinds. That day, he wasn't feeling as bad as usual, unlike the terrible days when everything hurt. Though his parents were spending more time holding his hand than usual, and the nurses had been speaking in softer tones recently, today was one of the better ones. He could tell something was different. Everyone appeared to be more cautious in their words and sadder. However, Jack was not scared. He knew the doctors had done everything they could, and while he didn't fully understand what that meant, he knew it wasn't anything to be concerned about. He had fought for so long, but now he was simply exhausted. Things had truly changed when his schoolteacher paid him a visit earlier that week. Jack missed his friends because he had been too sick to go to class for a while. He missed playing games, laughing with them, and even doing his homework. He was ecstatic when his teacher asked him if he wanted to record a video message for his classmates. Just a quick one to let your friends know what you're thinking. His teacher had said something. Jack gave it some thought before grinning. He wanted to tell his friends a lot, and perhaps this was the best alternative if he couldn't be there in person. Jack was tired but happy the day they shot the video. His teacher held up the camera, and his mother helped him sit up. Though Jack tried to remember everything he wanted to say, he eventually spoke from his heart. He told his friends that he missed them, that they should not be sad for him, and that he was fine with what was happening. "Being your friend has been quite enjoyable," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'll be fine. Don't worry about me." His teacher hugged him after he finished and promised to show his classmates the video. After that, Jack didn't give it much thought. He was just glad he could say goodbye in his own way. Then something unusual happened. His parents were on the phone more than usual the next day, and he overheard his father discussing how many people had seen the video online. People seemed to enjoy it, and today everyone was talking about his bravery. Jack was just being himself. He didn't feel particularly courageous, but it was nice to know so many people were thinking of him. Several days later, Jack's mother entered the room, startled. She informed him that someone significant had seen his video and wanted to pay him a visit. Jack initially had no idea why someone important would want to see him. Jack's eyes widened when his mother told him it was Kate Middleton, Princess of Wales. "Actually?" he inquired, not sure what to believe. Despite his tiredness, he couldn't help but be a little excited because the idea of a real princess visiting him seemed out of a storybook. The days preceding her trip seemed to fly by. Though Jack knew his time was running out, the prospect of meeting someone like Kate Middleton made him feel special, as if everything was happening for a reason. He lay there waiting, thinking about what he might say to her. Though he wished he could tell her how wonderful it was that she had come all the way to see someone like him, he wasn't sure he had the energy to talk much. Jack felt a flutter, possibly of hope or excitement, for the first time in a long time. She was prepared for whatever it was. As he lay there, Jack's thoughts drifted back to the beginning, anticipating what seemed to be the most significant turning point in his life. Before the cameras, phone calls, and significant visitors, it was just him, his family, and the long, quiet days of dealing with something no child should ever have to face. It hadn't always been this way. Jack was a typical child who enjoyed football, hanging out with friends, and dreamed of becoming an astronaut 2 years ago. He had many big dreams, and nothing seemed out of reach at the time. However, things changed abruptly. as if a door slammed shut when least expected. First and foremost, I had a persistent cough, was constantly tired, missed more school than usual, and so on. His parents initially thought it was just a passing bug that children pick up. When Jack's condition did not improve, he was taken to the doctor for a quick response. What they obtained was far more serious. The doctors poked and prodded Jack in ways he couldn't understand, administering test after test. He despised the institution. It was cold, immaculate, and packed with strange people. The air always smelt of disinfectant, and the bright fluorescent lights made everything appear harsh. But Jack, being the child he was, rarely grumbled. He just wanted to get home and resume playing with his friends. Jack would never forget the day he received the diagnosis. He was sitting in the doctor's office with his parents when the doctor finally said the words that would turn everything around. The disease is cancer. At the time, Jack had no clear understanding of what this meant. He knew it was terrible, something that made his father try to be strong while his mother sobbed quietly in the corner. Jack only wanted to know when he could get home. However, the response did not meet his expectations. Everything changed from that day forward into hospitals, treatments, and fighting a battle Jack had not requested. The treatments were demanding. There were days when he felt fine and days when he couldn't get out of bed. His hair began to fall out, and the frequent hospital visits dulled his once upbeat personality. He missed his school, his friends, and the simple pleasures of sprinting outside on a sunny day. Life had become a series of pointless conversations and doctor visits that went right over his head. Jack persisted, though, because he was resilient even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. Looking back, everything appeared to blur. Despite their best efforts, the doctors were unable to eradicate the cancer. Despite their efforts, it kept coming back, stronger than before. Finally, they informed his parents that their efforts had failed. Jack recalled this as well, despite his parents' attempts to soften the news. He understood both what they were trying to convey and what it implied. Though Jack was not one to dwell on the negative, it was hard to swallow. Over the years, he'd realized that some things were simply beyond his control, which was fine. He was no longer afraid. Jack's mind raced with memories from the previous 2 years before returning to reality. Outside his room, he could hear the nurse's soft footsteps and his parents' low murmur of conversation. It was nearly time. He was aware that things had changed. Everything about how people were acting, the low voices, the extra time his parents spent sitting by his side, suggested something more. Jack didn't have anyone to ask to spell it for him. He recognized, and it made the day more difficult, even though he had welcomed what lay ahead. His parents had been preparing for this for quite some time, ever since the doctors informed them that there was nothing else they could do. Jack noticed that they had shifted from inquiring about treatments and outcomes to emphasizing his comfort level. As if proximity were the only thing that mattered anymore, his mother began spending even more time with him, reading his favorite stories or simply sitting quietly by his bed. Not one for grand emotional outbursts, Jack's father had taken to sitting by his side in silence, holding his hand for hours without saying anything. Jack reasoned that it was adequate, and that was his way of expressing support. Though those conversations had become less frequent, they would occasionally discuss trivial matters such as football, previous camping trips, and what they would do if Jack felt better unexpectedly. These days, it was mainly about being with her. Jack's mother had sat him down that morning and gently informed him that the family would be stopping by later in the day to say goodbye. Jack knew it was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud made it more real. Though Jack could tell his mother was trying to be strong for him, her voice quivered when she spoke. He values that. He wanted them to be happy even when they couldn't do anything to change the outcome. His cousins, aunts, uncles, and grandparents began showing up throughout the day. Jack, who was feeling more exhausted than usual, remained mostly silent and smiled as each family member approached him to take his seat. They talked about childhood memories, birthday parties, family vacations, and amusing events from his early years. Jack enjoyed hearing those tales. They temporarily made him believe that everything was normal. His family members arrived one by one, spoke softly, and spent the last few minutes with him. His grandfather squeezed his hand and told him he was the bravest boy he had ever known. while his grandmother kissed him on the forehead and held back tears. His cousins sat awkwardly at first, but soon opened up, sharing the latest video games and school rumors with him, just as they had done in the past. The room held a silent recognition that this was the final chapter in a long and difficult journey. Jack was just tired. He was not afraid. Weary in a way that made him want to close his eyes and let the world fade away. And that is precisely what he did, drifting in and out of sleep while his family remained gathered around him. But there was another, more subdued emotion he couldn't quite express. Jack had always been a child who accepted life as it came, and even as his body deteriorated, he felt a strange sense of peace. It was time to relax. He had given his all, fought as hard as he could, and now. The door opened again as the afternoon faded into evening. Jack, eyes half closed, initially paid little attention. He assumed it was just another nurse checking on him, but he gently turned his head when he heard his parents' subdued voices, speaking with surprise. It was not a nurse. The Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, stood in the doorway. At first, Jack wasn't sure he was dreaming. Despite his foggy vision and fatigue, the man standing at the door was unmistakable. The name was Kate Middleton. He blinked several times to ensure he is not seeing anything. Why would she be in his room at this hour? His father, Mark, cleared his throat, unsure of what to say. His mother, Susan, stood slowly, smoothing the wrinkles in her shirt. People did not expect this. But Kate, cool under pressure, entered the room with a quiet grace that put everyone at ease. She was dressed casually and understatedly, unlike the fancy clothes Jack had seen her wearing on TV. After all, there were no cameras or reporters present for this public appearance. This was a personal visit. She had come for Jack, and at that point, she felt like just another person in the room, not a member of the royal family. Kate slowly approached the bed, staring at Jack. When she gently smiled, a genuine warm smile, Jack felt a little less anxious about the situation. She said nothing right away, and for a few moments, the room was silent, except for the soft beeping of the machines monitoring Jack's vital signs. Finally, Jack's mother spoke, her voice quivering but filled with gratitude. She said, looking at Kate with a mixture of surprise and relief, "Thank you for coming." Kate waved a little hand, dismissing the need for formality. She said softly, as if she did not need my thanks, "I am here for Jack." Her voice was gentle, but radiatively warm. She returned her attention to Jack, who was staring back at her with wide-open eyes, still processing what had happened. She approached his bed and sat down next to it. "Hello, Jack," she said, leaning slightly so only he could hear her. "After seeing your video, I decided to pay you a personal visit. I expect that to be fine." Still overwhelmed, Jack gave a gentle nod. Kate's company consoled him, even though he couldn't find the words to respond. She was not present to set a dramatic scene or discuss his illness. She was simply seated next to him, as if this visit were the most natural occurrence on Earth. The space seemed smaller and more personal. Jack's parents remained at the door, silently watching Kate speak gently to their son. They hadn't even realized it was possible, let alone prepared for it. But they were grateful for the unexpected surprise now, seeing how calm and present she was. Kate reached out and gently took Jack's hand in hers. She said with a low but honest voice, "You are quite brave. I wanted to let you know about myself." Jack forced a little smile. Although he didn't feel particularly courageous, hearing someone like Kate Middleton made it seem more real, as if he had done something worth remembering after all. They sat there for a while, not saying much because they didn't need to. Kate didn't prod Jack into conversation. She avoided trying to make the occasion about herself. Rather, she provided the kind of subdued company Jack didn't realize he needed. Her presence was enough to remind him that he wasn't alone, even in his final hours. Then, after a few minutes of silence, Kate acted in a way that no one else in the room would have predicted. Still clutching Jack's hand, she stood slowly and reached into the small bag she had packed. Jack's eyes followed her movements, fascinated by what she was doing. Unsure of what to expect next, his parents exchanged glances. Kate reached into the bag for a small, battered book. She held it so Jack could see, the kind of children's book you'd read and reread until the edges were frayed. Jack recognized the cover. He had read this classic tale when he was younger, but he hadn't given it much thought lately. "When I was younger," Kate said, her voice gentle and full of nostalgia, "this was one of my favorite books. Maybe you'd like to hear a little of it. If you're game, Jack blinked in surprise. Reading a story was not one of the things he had hoped would happen when Kate Middleton came to his bedside. But there was something in her demeanor that made him feel safe. He nodded again, this time more enthusiastically, and Kate smiled. She opened the book, sat back in the chair beside his bed, and began reading. Jack felt himself relax in a way he hadn't in a long time, as her voice was soothing and comforting, and the familiar words filled the room. Kate softly closed the book and placed it on the bedside table as she finished the story. She turned to check on Jack, who had fallen asleep. His small hand remained in hers. His face appeared calm for the first time in what seemed like an eternity, and his breathing was soft and consistent. Kate got up gently, careful not to startle him. She turned and smiled quietly at Mark and Susan. She said, barely above a whisper, "He is a wonderful boy. I appreciate you allowing me to spend some time with him." Susan, holding back tears, nodded gratefully. "We can't thank you enough," she whispered. "This implies more than you could possibly understand." Kate shined her head. She repeated, "There is no need to thank you. It was my honor." Kate made her way to the door, her demeanor as quiet and understated as it had been when she first walked in, and she cast another glance at Jack. Mark and Susan, their hearts full of gratitude for her compassion for their son, watched her leave. After Kate Middleton left, the room seemed strangely silent. Time seemed to stand still for a moment, leaving only the gentle sound of Jack's consistent breathing and the faint hum of the machines surrounding his bed. Mark and Susan stood there for several minutes, still processing what had just happened. Their son had just seen a member of the royal family. He had spent most of his short life in and out of hospitals. Kate Middleton didn't just pay him a visit. She sat by his side, read him a story, and shared a private, quiet moment with their son. Neither of them could have predicted this, but it seemed like Jack needed what he was seeing as he slept soundly. The tension in the room had subsided, leaving Mark and Susan with a sense of calm that they hadn't felt in days. Susan eventually returned to Jack's bedside, gently brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. Still resting on the table, she examined the book Kate had left behind, its pages slightly worn from years of use. Though it was a small, nearly meaningless object, it had a weight that she couldn't explain. This was more than just a royal official's visit. It was a reminder that kindness and humanity can still exist in the most difficult circumstances. Mark, who had been standing silently next to the door, finally spoke. "She came," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "which I find unbelievable." "Why then us? Jack, why?" Susan didn't need an answer, even if she didn't have it. She knew Jack's story had reached far more people than anyone could have imagined. However, this was a unique situation. Kate's visit restored normalcy to their lives, even if only for a short time, and she was grateful. The news of Kate Middleton's visit spread quickly. Although it had been a personal, private gesture, word quickly spread about her time with Jack. It wasn't long before headlines appeared online and piqued the public's interest. Nonetheless, this narrative was distinct from other royal activities. It wasn't about royal responsibilities or public appearances. It was about a small act of kindness performed for a young man whose bravery had inspired so many. Stories about Jack and his already viral video message dominated social media. People from all over the world shared their thoughts, praising Kate's decision to see him in his final days and how he handled his illness. Although there were no press releases or photographers present, this only added to the authenticity of the story. For many, this trip was not about glory or nobility. It was about a simple human connection between a lad and someone who cared enough to show up. It was neither a planned event nor a reported act of charity. It was simply a quiet moment spent with people who had made a lasting impression. Jack's parents received numerous encouraging notes as the story progressed. People from all walks of life contacted to express their sympathy and share their own stories of loss and resilience. Jack's strength and Kate's willingness to step outside her public persona to be by his side had moved the world. Jack grew weaker as the days passed. The family realized his time was running out. However, the room was peaceful after Kate's visit, which had not been the case previously. That small act of kindness appeared to have helped everyone process what was going on. Jack also appeared more at ease. Though he had always been a strong young man, in his final days he appeared to be calm about something his parents couldn't understand. Perhaps it was because he was able to say goodbye to his friends. Maybe he knew he was loved. Alternatively, in some small way, Kate's visit had provided him with closure. and served as a reminder that even in the most difficult of circumstances, good can still exist. His parents spent every moment with him, holding his hand, talking to him, and sharing quiet times with him. Though it had been far too brief, the room was filled with memories, family vacation photos, drawings Jack had made as a child, and small mementos from his life. Jack died peacefully, surrounded by those he loved the most. His parents held him close and whispered gentle words of comfort as he fell asleep peacefully and did not wake. There were no tears in that moment, just a quiet sense of relief that his suffering was finally over. The family had not publicly discussed Kate Middleton's visit. There were no news stories or interviews about it, but those who knew the story understood how important it was to Jack and his family. Kate had given them something unique, the unspoken knowledge that, even in the most difficult circumstances, they were not alone. How do you see Kate Middleton's gesture? Would you believe it if your family told you that a real-life princess was on her way to visit you? Tell us in the comments. Now, we appreciate your viewing and hope to see you in the next video.